Hello, everyone, and welcome to another All Tech is Human weekly live stream. Thanks for joining us today. I am Rebecca Tweed. I'm the executive director at All Tech is Human. We're a New York based nonprofit bringing together a global community of thousands of people to build the world's largest multi stakeholder, multidisciplinary network in responsible technology. We emphasize leveraging our collective intelligence so that we can more effectively tackle complex tech and society issues and co-create a tech future that's aligned with the public interest. We want to diversify tech to include more backgrounds, disciplines, perspectives, and lived experiences so that we're best positioned to meet the challenges that we face as a society today. And we want to greatly increase the pace of tech consideration so that we can meet the challenges of the moment because tech is not slowing down. We need to move at the speed of tech. So our goal is to build and strengthen the responsible technology ecosystem, and we do this through multi-stakeholder collaboration and community building, through multidisciplinary education and resource development, and through our career development work to build and strengthen the responsible tech talent pipeline. So you can check out all the ways you can get involved with us at alltechishuman.org, from our mentorship program to our university network, to our working groups, our affiliate program, to our talent matchmaking service, and our responsible tech job board. And of course, we have many upcoming events. We focus on responsible AI, trust and safety, tech policy, public interest technology, cyber and democracy, and youth, tech, and well-being. So today's discussion, it's part of our weekly live stream series, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by three incredible individuals. We will be discussing the report that we recently released following our hackathon, evaluating a responsible AI governance maturity model that was developed by Ravit Doughton of Tech Better, one of our panelists today, alongside Borhan Blilly Hamlin and Carol Anderson. Great to have all of you today. Welcome. So you can find, all of you who are watching, you can find the report at alltechishuman.org as well as techbetter.ai. So please download it, dig into this great resource that we put together for you. We will be taking questions at the end. So if you're watching this on live stream on LinkedIn right now, just go ahead and drop a question into the comment section. We want to know what you're wondering about and what you're thinking about with regards to this report. And we want to also know where you're tuning in from. So just drop that into the comments as well. Okay, so first, would love to just do a quick round of introductions. Want to hear a little about who you are and your work and how it relates to this project. So I want to kick things off with Ravit. Can you get us started?
Yes. First of all, great to be here. Thanks for having us, Rebecca. I'm super excited to be here today and to have done this project with the All Tech is Human community. And my background. So I'm in the field of AI ethics. I specialize in AI governance. What does it mean to govern AI well? So I do research and I do consulting, and I also do a lot of public engagement. So follow me on LinkedIn. And out of that context, I initiated this project to create this maturity model to evaluate companies.
Awesome. Yeah. Great. Would love to hear next from Bo. Can you tell us a little about yourself and just connect your work to the maturity model and the hackathon that we put together?
Absolutely. The first thing I want to say, I'm really excited to be here. I'm based in New York, and I've met so many of my close collaborators and friends through All Tech is Human, and so it actually means a lot to be doing this project in collaboration with All Tech is Human. Similarly to Ravit, I actually have a background in philosophy. I have a PhD in philosophy. That's how we met and we started talking. I love Ravit's research that's between philosophy and risk management. These days, I still draw on that kind of work. So I'm an ethicist, and I'm focused on enabling better collective experimentation and mitigating AI harm. I feel like that's really the unifying theme of my work. And I do this in a couple of ways. So I'm an officer at the AI Risk and Vulnerability Alliance, which is a nonprofit dedicated to empowering communities to mitigate AI harm. I'm also an affiliate at Data and Society, where we do research. and a consultant at Babel AI, where I do like AI risk management consulting. And the thing that I feel like really like brings this together for me in this project is the combination of research, risk management, and really trying to put solutions into practice with participation, specifically leveraging highly interactive workshops to enable better collaboration. There's one thought I want to put on the table just now that I would be excited to revisit to the conversation, which is when we think about governance, it's really easy to imagine the solution being more governance and more bureaucracy. And it's a question that's come up a lot in the hackathon. Like, what does it look like for different kinds of organizations to do governance? And there's an example that I find really powerful coming from road safety engineering, which is a city in the Netherlands in the early 2000s, where the decision was made by a safety engineer that the best way to achieve safety outcomes on the streets was to take traffic signs out. So to take out the things that look like road safety engineering. And for this context, that was the better solution to drive the outcomes, because it empowers people on the streets to make decisions and take a more active role in protecting themselves. And the question that I'm curious to revisit is, what does this kind of question look like for governance? Like, what does it look like in a governance setting to treat governance not as something that always has to look the same way, but instead as something that has to be tailored to the context and the purpose and the outcomes of the organizations or group that's implementing it. All right.
I love that. Thank you, Bo. Yeah, we will revisit that. We'll pull that into the conversation later. Thank you for that really cool example for some scene setting. Carol, let's turn to you.
Sure. Hi. So I'm Carol Anderson, and I have a background as a machine learning practitioner. So for the last several years, I've focused on language model-based systems, most recently at NVIDIA, where I worked on training and testing models for conversational AI. And before going into tech, I was an academic molecular biologist for a number of years. And then just in the past year or two, I've been working on making a transition into AI ethics and responsible AI. And I don't have a regular job now. I'm kind of freelancing and cobbling different things together. And All Tech is Human has been an amazing resource in doing that transition and, trying to figure out my niche in this ecosystem. So one of the things that I do is I'm very active as a volunteer with the nonprofit AI Risk and Vulnerability Alliance, which Bo also mentioned. And I have a lead role there. And this maturity model, not connected with that, but it was through that network that I got connected with Ravid and the rest of the team developing the maturity model. And I got to help organize the hackathon. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Rebecca.
That's great. Okay, so I hope everyone has had a chance to download the report, check it out a little bit. Ravid, I want to turn to you for this one. Can you tell us a little bit about the responsible AI governance maturity model that you came up with? Can you tell us why are you doing this? What's the problem that you're solving with this maturity model?
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Okay, so the problem really is how to provide guidance for companies, and at the same time, how to provide guidance to anyone who wants to evaluate companies. Something that stands in the background here is me noticing that when people are trying to evaluate companies today under AI governance, often they'll turn to things like, well, do they have AI ethics principles? Do they have an AI ethics committee? These things can be helpful, but also they can be a tool for ethics washing. One thing that is in the background here is actually a previous research study that I did where we studied public disclosures from 254 companies. And we wanted to see what is it that they claim that they're doing. They were all big organizations, Western organizations. I mean, not all of them, but most of them. And it was pretty clear. It was 76% of them had some kind of external indicator, such as like principles, commitments, thought leadership, but a really small fraction of that actually had any kind of implementation activities. So, red teaming, incident inventory, really kind of minuscule percentages. So what we get is companies, even if they have good intention when they create those guidelines or committee or whatever it is, it's not happening, there's a gap. And at the same time, people who want to evaluate them externally are relying on the wrong things. So the gap here really is two things. One, how do you help companies build up, start from wherever they are today and just help them improve, but really improve in terms of what they implement? And at the same time, how do you help people see from the outside what the company is actually doing? What are those more reliable indicators that people can latch onto? So this dual gap is what makes me very excited about this model.
Great. And I'm curious, as you were, okay, you put the model together. Bo, maybe I could turn to you for this one. How did you decide that a hackathon is what you wanted to do next, to open the model up and to bring in a community of people? Why was this the preferred way to move forward?
Absolutely. So the context is during the pandemic, I became incredible. I mean, that's the context for me. Like, so I became really, really passionate about using virtual workshops to enable collaboration and to enable groups to come together and achieve an outcome. And Ravit and I had been, talking for months about like looking for ways to like leverage workshops or maybe a hackathon or some such thing. And Ravit had the maturity model project and had the idea that like she wanted public input and in those conversations, like, oh wait, like what about doing a hackathon was like, the question we started asking. And the thing about hackathon that involves workshops like this that feels really, really key for me for why this felt like a compelling approach is a combination of two things. The first one is, of course, we wanted feedback. We built a maturity model, and we think of a maturity model as something that has to be useful. It's a product, and that means we have to understand what work does this do for people who aren't us. Like, we built it and we made it look this way because of our preferences and because of the knowledge we had at the time we built it. But it was really, really key as we worked on and built the maturity model back in the fall, and we always like had this idea of getting feedback, putting it in the hands of people and seeing what that looks like, seeing what changes we want to make in response to that feedback. So that's the first component. But the second component that is really key to me to like why do something like a hackathon is participation is amazing, but it's also basically asking people to come and do work for you. And the thing about workshops and hackathons is they can be, when they're well built, an opportunity to provide something of value to participants. Like, that's the goal for me. It's like, yes, we want feedback, but we also want to build something that is intrinsically incredibly valuable for participants, where this is worth their time. And so what do people get out of this was the question for us. Yes, we're going to get feedback, but we could do that in different ways. But doing it through a hackathon enables us to do a couple of different things. The first one is education. We hope people can learn something, and we heard from countless people they learned something. The second one, which is also not trivial, is connection. We built the hackathon with an eye to both, during the sessions themselves, enable people to meet each other, get to know each other. That's why we put such an emphasis on breakout rooms. But also, surrounding the event itself, like give people opportunities to interact. That's why we had a Slack channel. That's why we were so excited to see people build reading groups around the hackathon. And the third bit for me is the experience of collaboration. So like getting to think through questions together, specifically during the sessions that looked like getting to ask questions together and getting to surface insights together. And there's a story I heard from a participant afterwards who is the founder of a health tech startup. And afterwards we were chatting and the kids were like, like hackathons just like this would actually meet, like on its own, would meet real needs in the health tech space. Here's an example. And basically like the participant convinced me immediately, wait, there's something that is of such value there that people would be willing to pay for something like the hackathon because it is intrinsically valuable, because it delivers outcome. And that's, to me, the combination of features that makes a hackathon like this so attractive.
And I want to add here, I think you're touching on some of the really important reasons that All Tech is Human wanted to collaborate as well, providing an opportunity for education and a resource, but something we can build together, an opportunity for the community to practice these things and to put them in action, not just talk about them or pontificate or theorize, but to really do it. And then the connection building, that's a huge part of what we do at All Tech is Human. And so providing these opportunities, it was such a wonderful chance to do that. And I appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with you all on such a valuable project. So wanted to throw that out there. Um, so Carol, I wanted to turn to you. One of the pieces of feedback that we got from many participants was noting how challenging it was to rely on publicly available information and not having insights into what the companies themselves, the data and the information that they had internally. So wanted to ask you, how does applying the model based on internal information differ from applying it based on external information?
Yeah, so just for context for anyone who didn't participate in the hackathon, we asked participants to apply the maturity model to a company of their choosing. And so they were able to choose a company that they worked at where they had inside information, or they could choose any company, and then just look for external documents. And most of the participants chose the latter. I think that, even if you did have inside access at a company, it probably would have been difficult to pull together all the required information, within the compressed time frame of the hackathon. So it makes sense that a lot of people chose to do companies where they had to rely on external documents. And yeah, as you said, that was very challenging. Um, One thing that was really cool, though, was just how resourceful the participants were about digging up documents to evaluate the companies they chose. So, of course, there's the obvious stuff like looking at a company's website or their blog posts, annual reports, and things like that. But people also looked at things like media reports or lawsuits as evidence that something bad is going on. Um, and even things like technical reports or academic papers. Um, but still it's difficult because that information is pretty sparse and it can be very vague and high level. The companies may make these vague claims like, yeah, we've tested our models for bias. Um, and I think, one participant noted in their feedback that a lot of these things are just like puffery or overstated claims. Um, so they really might be overstating their own efforts. And one of the interesting things that came out of this was that the in scoring, so participants were asked to give a score of low, medium, or high to the company on various points, and the score of medium turned out to be really popular. And I'm sure that there are a lot of reasons for that, but maybe one of the reasons is that they're relying on incomplete information, and so it can be hard to know with any confidence that the company is doing well or doing poorly. Um, so if you do have access to internal documents, you can get a more complete assessment. And some of the participants noted this, that they felt like the maturity model would be most effective if you used it internally, because then you could rely on things like policies or procedure manuals, testing results, planning documents, things like roadmaps, KPIs, or even conversations that you would have with people in the company. Um, so if you have that kind of access, then it can be really useful as a tool for diagnosis and internal discussions around the company's development and areas of strength and weakness, and allowing the company to track their progress. But still, even though, if you're using it externally, it's there are limitations to how accurately you can assess something. Still, there is a need for a tool like this. So if you think of someone like a prospective investor that wants to kind of evaluate a company they're thinking about investing in, or maybe a customer, someone in procurement, they're looking at different AI systems they could buy. There is this need to be able to assess a company from the outside, and so I think that the maturity model can fill that need. Of course, with the caveat that you're relying on incomplete information.
Yeah, and you bring up something interesting. I think kind of tying it back in with what Bo was talking about at the beginning of kind of a tailored governance approach, wondering I don't know, I'm thinking about who can benefit from this kind of maturity model, and thinking about what kind of companies actually need this. And you have, Carol, you've laid out some examples of why externally, why you would want to know this about a company. And I'm curious, kind of from the other side of it, what do any of you think is a good use case? Who would really benefit from pulling all of this information together internally and providing it, making it publicly available, and having this governance model applied to their own company?
I think we all have thoughts on this. Were you directing the question at? And maybe
Just at anyone, yes, all of you.
Okay, happy to go. So one thought that is really crucial for me, it's a simple question. Do you believe in achieving your goals through sheer luck? Like, are you willing to roll the dice on the question of whether you're achieving your goals? It's a simple question. And if the answer is no, then you should be interested in governance. It's very simple, so it's the question of like, what is governance, right? And whenever you have a community or an organization that is concerned about achieving its goals, and that is concerned about achieving its goal through means other than sheer luck, then governance is relevant. And my answer for like who needs this maturity model, and to me this speaks to one of the most exciting features of the model, is it's been designed to be incredibly flexible. And there's flexibility both with the kinds of organization who can apply it and get insights, right? Like the goal isn't to say, oh my God, we're doing poorly. The goal is to get information that can help drive outcomes and that can help improve an organization's governance, and that can help an organization move away from doing, risk mitigation through sheer luck. And one of the features that is most exciting to me about the model is how flexible it is, both with the company size, the kind of company, but also with what you apply it for. You can apply it for a single system. You can apply it for an entire team or program. You can apply it for an entire organization. And to me, the flexibility means, like any organization should be able to use this and get answers that help them. Does that mean that applying it in every setting is going to look the same? Does it mean that the scoring will look consistent and will will this enable meaningful comparisons? Maybe that might be variable, and that's an area where we definitely want to be doing further work to think through what does it look like to make applying the model a little bit more consistent. But this mindset of flexibility means if you care about doing risk management not through sheer luck, then this model could help you.
Great, thank you, Bo.
I want to chime in also, if that's okay. Yeah, I just love this framing, Bo. Do you care about not having your results through luck? I love that. Totally agree. And I want to add to it, there are 3 types of audiences that I mostly have in mind. One is the companies themselves. And as Bo said, we've built this maturity model to be flexible so that it could fit different kinds of companies. A big company, a small company, early in the development life cycle, late in the development life cycle, but all of them, as Bo said, if they care about achieving their goals, this is a tool that is meant to help them. So that's one audience, the tech companies themselves who develop the technology, but also companies that utilize the technology, because some of the things are doable even for them. And in fact, a lot of the responsibility actually is on them, right? And so this can help them too. So those companies who are utilizing the technology, and while I'm at those companies do 2 things, right? They deploy the tools, but they also usually buy the tools, right? They procure them. Procurement is actually key, I think, to AI responsibility, because that's when you get to scrutinize and make decisions and decide what you put in the contract. I hear a lot from companies that they're struggling with this, especially, with the inflation of generative AI tools that I feel like I need to actively get them out of my way almost, right? But they don't necessarily know which questions to even ask. And that's when they might be tempted to rely on signals that are actually misleading, such as, does the company have AI ethics principles? Maybe they do, but they do nothing with those principles. And so this can be, the maturity model is also a guide for them when they do look into the company. What should they be asking? What should they be looking to, especially if they're actually non-technical people who are not going to dive into the data set, right? Often companies can't do that at the procurement stage, but what they can do, what they're totally capable of doing, is evaluating the governance and asking, what kind of processes do you have? Do you do anything for fairness? Do you have any kind of metric? They can, in fact, start with the public documents. And as Carol said, it can be difficult to evaluate public documents because, you know, another way of saying something that we've noticed is like often they're more like marketing documents. So they don't have real content. And that can be, in a way, a challenge, but also it just highlights to me how the maturity model is actually needed for those people who are looking. Because some of the comments that we got was people saying, you know, superficially, this document looked really good. However, when I use the maturity model to think about it more, I realize how much is missing. I realize how much of this is actually superficial, which can help both if it's someone from procurement or an investor or an insurance company, anyone who has a financial stake in what's going on in the company, but also just consumers. So I'm thinking of even consumer organizations. If they do want to evaluate companies, this can be a tool for them to say, you know, this document looks really fancy. However, it doesn't actually have a lot of helpful content.
And I think that speaks a little bit to incentives too, that it'll shift incentives a bit for companies that are developing the AI, because, you know, the publicly available information, the purpose of that isn't for, you know, auditing their materials. It's marketing. It's you know, it's public facing for a reason. And so if it's not legally mandated that they put this information out there, they're not necessarily going to be spelling it out for everybody, because then they are going to be held responsible for that. So it seems like this is a great way, filling the gap with this kind of maturity model where you are incentivizing companies to be putting materials out there for people who are trying to, you know, looking for procurement, for instance. So yeah, I really appreciate that angle.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And in fact, yeah, this is actually my hope. You know, if this model becomes the standard for everyone, that's exactly what I'm hoping for. But even if it's another model that's like that, just something that makes it really clear what information is substantive, and then we can create consumer pressure on companies to actually divulge information that will help us evaluate them. So exactly what you said is my hope.
Great. So we do want to bring in a couple of questions from the audience. I'm seeing quite a few really good ones come through. So we're going to put a question up from Blake Chambers. So audience question here. Let's see. Related to content moderation of generative conversational AI, for example, mitigating harm from content generated by chatbots built on top of an LLM API. What are different ways that companies are communicating how content that generates content, specifically stochastically generated, is different from previous technologies? And how are they framing the risks of the differences? Does anyone want to take a stab at that? Bo.
Okay. There's so many layers to this. So Carol and I are collaborating with Data and Society on a research project on generative AI harm and red teaming specifically in this setting. It means we're thinking through like this kind of question a lot. And I know Carol has a lot to say on this too. And I know Rafi does as well. So just one thought. One of the key changes to me with generative AI is a supply chain change. And it's not always the case, but that is the case for the companies that are building you know, what's called foundation models. For me, foundation models just means you're building a very, very, very expensive and very, very flexible thing with the intention that it can be put to many, 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 many different uses. And that creates a supply chain positioning that is unusual in terms of from a risk management perspective. So a story that is core to the NIST AI-RMF and that is core to AI risk management is you need to be thinking about context of use in doing harm mitigation and in doing risk mitigation. Go back to exactly what is this system going to do in the world. And one of the, to me, unique and interesting differences with a lot of what is happening with generative AI is this supply chain positioning, where the largest providers and builders of generative AI models are building tools that are meant to be useful across so many different settings, and that really changes what you can do from a risk management perspective. There's another thought on this that I want to flag, which is, and I'll try to be short, which is, to me, the Google Gemini release really helps pinpoint an aspect of talking about risk that I wish companies could do better on, which is not what values did you build into your system. So that's what a lot of the headlines were about, is oh, look at the woke Gemini text to image filters. The story that I wish had been more upfront, such that the backlash, or to me would have looked different, is look at the kind of mitigations we used, and here are their limitations. We use a mitigation technique that has known downsides. Here are the downsides. This is how we do it. We force the model to generate images of people that have diverse skin colors, diverse gender, and so on and so forth in this kind of way. Here's the consequence. And here are the limitations. And so one thing I wish was the case with generative AI is much, much, much better communication about the limitations of the mitigation techniques that get used.
Right. And transparency about, here are the capabilities, here are the limitations, here's how they intersect, and here's what happens when we put them together in this way. Carol, wanted to open it up to you.
Yeah, I think that the transparency piece of it that you just mentioned is what stands out to me about this question. And how are companies communicating? I think we've all seen that a lot of companies are not communicating about this, and they may even just be trying to pass off AI generated content as human. And so to connect that back to the maturity model, the maturity model is built on the NIST AI risk management framework, and one of the key pieces, the characteristics of trustworthy AI in that framework is transparency. And so there's a section of the maturity model that assesses transparency, and so these kinds of questions, are an important part of the assessing the company's AI maturity. And the risk, so the part of this question is also about risk, and that's also there's several sections of the maturity model that are assessing how is a company mapping their risks, and do they have a risk mitigation plan in place. So that's also an important piece of becoming mature in your use of AI.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as we are coming to a bit toward the end of our time together, so I did want to get one more question in that each of you can answer. I'm really curious to hear from each of you. What is one personal takeaway from the hackathon? What insights did you gain from this experience? And I wonder if we can start with Ravi.
Thanks. Okay, one, All Tech is Human community is awesome. I guess I already knew it. But it was amazing to be a part of it in person. Another thing that I'll say is there was so much excitement around the maturity model. It was amazing. And for me, it vindicated my intuition that this tool is actually needed, that it's sorely needed. And it works, which was amazing to see. But I want to emphasize something more, going into a more, I guess, personal angle, because you asked personally. I am also a career changer. I was an academic. I started grad school wanting to be a philosophy professor, but I changed my mind. And we all know how painful that is. One of the reasons I didn't feel academia was the right place for me is because I felt this is not how I want to do research. In academia, for me, I was in philosophy. You have this track, research, and then you have this track, education, and they're separate. And then there's a track of social impact, which maybe you get to, maybe you don't. but I wanted to see all three of them happening together. And Bo alluded to it before, and I was thinking about this for a long, long time. How is it possible, and if so, how, to combine rigorous research with actual participation that doesn't take advantage of the participants, but adds value to them? For example, through education, and at the same time creating social impact. And the hackathon was a way to do it. So in addition to the professional goals of contributing to the responsible AI community, I also wanted to see, does this model work? Can you do research while also doing education and add value to people and have social impact? It was amazing for me to see that the answer was yes. And for me, that was so satisfying to see.
Excellent. Great to hear that. Carol, I wonder if you would mind going next and telling us about the personal impact for you.
Yeah, I guess echoing what Ravit said, I think for me the biggest takeaway was just how intense the interest was in this hackathon, and how many people showed up and how engaged they were, and even wanting to stay engaged after the hackathon. I think that really underlines how strong the need is for tools in this area. And even a number of participants said that they saw this as more than just an assessment tool. It's actually can function as kind of like a roadmap or a to-do list for a company that wants to get started on its responsible AI journey. So that was my main takeaway. I think another interesting thing that came out of it was that people noted how hard it is to evaluate a company without comparing it to other companies. And that wasn't something that I, assumed going into it. I sort of assumed, okay, you'll be able to, there's sort of an objective scale here and you'll be able to evaluate a company in isolation, but it turns out that that's really difficult to do. And maybe partly just because of the moment that we're in, where all the companies are figuring this all out at once. And so it's hard not to ask yourself, well, what's,
Yeah, good point. Bo?
It's going to sound really similar. For me, the amount of interest is also like the most surprising bit here. I've done a lot of projects that rely on the same style of workshop or hackathon to get folks to collaborate. I've also done projects that were specifically meant for, it's a research project, but we're going to use exactly this kind of workshop for participation and to like enable a group to shape every stage of a research project. I've never seen anything like the amount of collaboration, but also like the amount of interest we've had and the amount of buy-in, but also the follow-through. It is very surprising, for instance, that we had 250 people sign up and then we capped it, right? We made the call because we wanted this to be a workshop. It can't be too big, right? And we capped it at 250. And then 150 people showed up. Like, that is not normal in terms of conversion rate. When I see 250 people show up, in my mind, if a third of these people show up, in the actual session, that is amazing. But then we saw, of those 180 something people that were there the first day, like I think over 150 of them were there by the end of the 90-minute session. And again, it's like the amount of these amounts are staggering to me. The amount of interest is just really surprising. There's another takeaway for me, which is more along the lines of something that I'm really curious about and really hungry to dig into, which is participants were like really like keen to notice, like, oh wow, like the activities that the model most is like loudly describes can look a lot like they lend themselves to very, very large organizations that can afford to build much more bureaucracy. And one area that I'm like really curious to explore and pushing the model further is how do we bring more specificity to the question of what good governance looks like, as different from what activities did you implement? And that's going back to the example of like road safety. So to me, the lesson from that road safety example, where the decision that was made is take away all the signs, is a lesson about how to achieve your goal in a given context, given the constraints and the mechanisms you can rely on. And I'm really, really curious to see how we can bring, in evolving this maturity model, this question of how are you achieving your governance goals, and how effective a job are you doing at this, given your positioning, your constraints, and so on and so forth. And the observation that many participants had, that on its face, at first glance, a lot of the activities kind of look like again, like they're biased towards like bigger organizations. That makes me hungry to bring a little bit more specificity to how we describe what good looks like relative to your context and goals.
Sounds like that's a great follow-up project. So, okay, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. It looks like we are out of time. The comments have been great. I really appreciate everyone being so engaged during the live stream. Please follow up. I want you to know that you will be able to find the live stream not only on LinkedIn, but it'll be on All Tech is Human's YouTube following, actually, I think it'll be up tomorrow. So want everyone to know that. And then the other thing that I wanted to make sure everyone knows is how you can keep up with all of us. So All Tech is Human, you can find us at alltechishuman.org. And also please sign up for our newsletter. We send it out every 2 weeks. You'll find tons of information about all of our activities and other things like this hackathon that you can get involved in. Also want to encourage you to check out Ravit's work. So techbetter.ai, there is a newsletter that you can sign up for there as well. But I definitely encourage you to follow Ravit's LinkedIn. It is so good and lots of great information and resources all the time. So check that out. And then also the work that Bo and Carol are doing for the organization that they've mentioned. You can find their work there at avidml.org, avidml.org. So want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much to our panelists. It was really wonderful to connect with all of you and to share the findings from the hackathon and to talk about the report with you. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you so much.